This episode of Parenting Great Kids is brought to you by NHCPS. Friends, 4 out of 5 cardiac arrests and medical emergencies happen at home. That's an 88% chance the life you save with CPR will be your child, spouse, or friend. NHCPS.com is an online CPR certification provider where you can become CPR certified for free. Learn CPR for free with NHCPS.com. Just go to NHCPS.com/Meg and use the coupon code MEG at checkout. That's coupon code MEG at NHCPS.com/Meg. For 30 plus years, I've seen every type of child grow up.
Instead of giving me what I wanted, she gave me what I needed, which was truth.
Don't let emotions win. Let truth win.
Do your very best, and you should have a lot of fun while you do it. And the better you get at something, the more fun you're going to have at something.
You moms and dads are wired with everything you need to be a parent to a great kid. Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. This is episode number 41, The Hope of Adoption. I'm your host, Dr. Meg Meeker. Friends, this is a very special episode, and I'm so excited to share it with you. November is National Adoption Awareness Month, and this is a cause that's very dear to my heart. It's also a cause very near and dear to the heart of multiple Grammy and Dove Award-winning artist Steven Curtis Chapman and his family. As many of you who are familiar with the Chapman story know, the family has adopted 3 precious girls from China, which was the catalyst for the creation of a nonprofit organization that has served many thousands of adoptive families through grants and care services. I'm honored to have this opportunity to share with you a very special interview I did with Steven Curtis, his lovely wife Mary Beth Chapman, and their biological daughter Emily. Their story is both beautiful and painful and filled with all the ups and downs that many adoptive families experience throughout their journeys. Parents, remember, don't just download episodes, click subscribe. When you do that, you're joining my parenting revolution, and every new episode will automatically show up in your subscribed list. And we'd love for you to write us a review on iTunes. Let us know what you think. Also, not only are we on iTunes, but the Parenting Great Kids podcast is also available in the Google Play Store and on Stitcher. So no matter where you get your podcast, subscribe today and don't miss a single episode. Friends, it seems like we can't get through a news cycle without hearing another tragic story about a victim of bullying. A child who's beat up, taunted online, or in worst case scenario, has even committed suicide because he can't take the pain anymore. Bullying is more than a problem. It's an epidemic that's taking a toll on an entire generation. Something that used to be limited to the schoolyard and cafeteria is now possible to do anywhere, anytime with technology and social media. Cyberbullying is now just as common, if not more so, than face-to-face bullying. And this digital age has affected our children psychologically in ways we're only now beginning to understand. Whether the bullying occurs in the school or online, parents often feel helpless in this realm. What can you do? How do you protect your child? How do you prevent him or her from being a victim of bullying or from becoming a bully? But as a strong believer in parents, I don't think you're helpless when it comes to bullying. To help you navigate this crucial subject, I've written a special ebook, Bullying, What Every Parent Can Do About It. In this ebook, I discuss topics such as bullying at school, cyberbullying, what you can do if your child is being bullied, and what you can do if your child is the bully. To get your copy of my bullying ebook for only $2.99, go to megmeekermd.com/bullying today. And when you use coupon code BULLYINGPODCAST, I'll give you an extra $1 off. Parents, bullying is an epidemic, but it isn't hopeless. Go to megmeekermd.com/bullying and get your ebook today. So parents, thanks for listening. Grab a cup of coffee and enjoy this very special episode of Parenting Great Kids with the Chapman family. Well, Steven and Mary Beth and Emily, welcome to the podcast. Thank you all so much for being on with me today to talk about your work with adoption.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yes.
I want to direct my first question to Stephen and Mary Beth. Many people have come to know and love your family through the years of Stephen's music. But what many may not know is that you're very involved with adoption. And in 2000, your family took a turn and began the adoption process of 3 daughters over time from China. And many people aren't familiar with your personal story. And what prompted you to adopt 3 children or any children when you already had 3 biological children?
Well, that is a long, amazing story because I am the one who tends to ramble on, and my wife is much better at doing the concise Reader's Digest version. I'll let her take that one.
Okay. So in 1997, our oldest daughter, Emily, who is on this podcast with us,
Hello.
She and I took a trip to Haiti with Compassion International, and it changed both of our lives. And we came back from that trip, and our 11-year-old at the time, Emily, basically said, "We have room at our table. We need to consider opening up our home to a child who does not have a mother or a father." And Stephen and I thought, that's so awesome that her heart, the capacity to love and see the world in the way that she had on that trip, happened, at that time. And so we told her that was a great idea for her when she grew up and had her own family, one day. And, but with great persistence, many letters written to us, Emily was our resident theologian even when she was teeny, and she would write us letters and just ask us to pray, and wrote contracts with her brothers and had them sign as witnesses, and wrote us a letter that said we may be living in disobedience to God if we don't consider this. it was full court press. So what that did, I think secretly Stephen was praying that our family might enlarge, through the miracle of adoption. And quite frankly, I was really fearful. I was fearful of my own heart, my own capacity, and to love and all of that. And so what I did commit to do is pray. And through the course of many miracles and God speaking to us, and just very clearly showed me that it was something that we needed to step forward in. And so we walked towards adoption, and that resulted in us bringing Shohana home, and then Stevie Joy home, and Maria. So it's an amazing story. That's kind of the short version of a lot of things that happened during that time.
So, Emily, I'd like you to chime in here if you could. So you're the 11-year-old who's writing letters to your parents. I've never met an 11-year-old who has so persistently written letters to her parents to bring more kids into the family. Can you talk to us about what it was like being in 5th or 6th grade with this burden on your heart to bring more children into the family?
Yeah. After the trip to Haiti, as an 11-year-old, I had met a lot of children my same age, that were navigating life without mother or father in the picture. And so my head kind of started spinning and thinking, what would that be like to sort of have to navigate life and live life without the support systems that I just take for granted? And so came home really passionate about helping however I could, and at the time didn't know exactly what that looked like, but there was a friend on the trip, and we went to church together, and their family was heavily involved in foster care and had adopted a couple of children domestically here. And I just kind of latched onto that and thought, okay, well, if we can't go live in Haiti and help, I wonder if we could expand our family through adoption. And so, it just started. There was something that was just burning in my heart, and I knew I needed to continue to pray and advocate how I knew to at 11 years old. And so that was writing letters and convincing my parents that I would help and that the boys would help. And so that's where the contracts came in, because I had to convince them that we would all pitch in. And and we've all pitched in. But yeah, I reflect now as an adult who has children of my own, what was happening at that age. And sometimes I wish I could get back to how fervently I was praying at 11 years old for something that I believed so deeply in my heart was what God had in store for our family. But I think there's part of that childlike faith, in that moment, that I just was really convinced of something, and nothing was going to stop me, even a mom and a dad at that time that thought, this is crazy. What is she talking about? And I continued to pray, and it was certainly the Lord who changed their hearts and kind of moved in our family toward this, because Dad's career was very busy, continues to be at the time, and so it was a lot to kind of start over in a sense. My youngest brother was 9 at the time, and so we kind of started over with the girls in terms of a family, but we all pitched in, and it's one of the greatest blessings of my life.
I'll chime in just real quickly, because I've thought about this a lot as I've been singing my songs and telling my story on tour night after night. I'm kind of in an interesting season right now with my music, and I'm doing a lot of, having written my story recently, released my autobiography called Between Heaven and the Real World, and just telling the story of meeting Mary Beth and then our children and then adoption and all of this, kind of remembering it and reliving it and retelling it night after night with music. I've been singing a little bit of the song I wrote for Emily when she was about this age. It was a song called Fingerprints of God that I wrote really as she was kind of just going through a lot of trying to figure out if she was beautiful and not feeling that, and just wanting to encourage her. But it's interesting as I sing this song now, and I look back and see how God's fingerprints were, even in ways that we didn't even realize, on Emily's life and heart, and moving us in a direction that we didn't even know at the time. That song is so fun to sing it now, because I even realize more as I look at the work of Show Hope, I look at our own story of adoption, and all the ways that God's hands have been on and working through Emily's life and our family in a pretty profound way. So way to go, Em.
Way to go, Emily.
And
as I sit here, I think your oldest daughter's 5, right, Emily?
Yes.
Ha. Just wait.
I know.
I think there's been a couple times that Em's looked at me and said, I had, now that she has her 3 little girls.
Yeah, no idea.
She looks at me and she's like, Mom, I had no idea what I was asking you and Dad to step into. No idea. No clue. Now I have a little bit of a snapshot of, what must have been reeling in your mind that you were going to start over.
Yeah.
But the wonderful
crazy.
But the wonderful part is that what Emily could bring was the absence of fear. She had, because she didn't know what she was really asking, she had no fear. There was just a pure boldness. And shouldn't we all approach life in many ways that way?
Oh, certainly.
Without that fear, but it's that childlike. I also want to stop and say something to our listeners. This is the beauty and the goodness and greatness that can live inside of an 11-year-old child. Their heart is so open to listening to God, to believing and going. Whereas we adults are so, well, wait a minute, I need to think, but in a culture where we look at pre-adolescent kids as hard to live with and hard to deal with, look at the beauty that is in them as well. And I just think that's a fabulous, fabulous story that this young little child in your home brought so much blessing to you all.
We also can't discount what God does in an 11-year-old that we can't see. I wish I could see how God sees time. It's not this linear line that just kind of runs from point A to point B, but I think it looks a whole lot more, crazy, and how all of his time fits. But, now we fast forward, and this wasn't, Emily in a moment of time saying, I've had this experience, and now this is what needs, this is what I want, out of it. It's shaped her for the rest of her life. And she's 31 years old now. She, grew up. Okay, this is bragging mom moment now. She, grew up went to Baylor University, got her degree in international studies, met her husband when she came back here. They moved to Ireland for 3 years. They went to Bible college and she got her master's in theology. Fast forward 3 little girls later, she's now the vice president, executive assistant director at Show Hope, which is the organization that Steven and I founded in order to help more children. And so that experience of an 11-year-old, God worked just all the way through time to, have this for her now, and just to see those fingerprints now, just where she's at and how we get to work together day in and day out in this thing that we love. That is our heartbeat of our family. It's quite amazing.
And so really God's movement in her to want to adopt was just the beginning of a bunch of blessings that were just going to have a huge ripple effect throughout your family, your community, the world, her family. But that's so God. I mean, that is just so cool. So Mary Beth, you said that early on after your trip to Haiti and Emily was writing letters that you had some fears. What were your fears and how did you get over them?
I had a good friend who they were walking through adoption and a lot of foster care and loved their hearts, loved what they were doing. It was quite often that I would imagine myself in that situation, adopting a child into our family. And quite honestly, I just didn't believe in myself. I have a lot of fear in how I parent anyways. Wow. And so I was just thinking, if I bring a child into our family and I want to be, fully there, fully mom. And I was really, really fearful of how I would attach that child, how that child would attach to me, all the fears that I think families have when they're stepping into this thing called adoption. Although I didn't know what it all was at the time, I've learned a lot since our journey through adoption, but I was just scared. I was really scared that I wasn't going to be able to do it, just 1,000%, fully there.
I've had a number of my parents of my patients express to me before adoption that one of their big fears is they won't love their adoptive children as well as their biologic children. Is that a fear you had? And then how did you work through that?
Sure. I remember early on when I really got a sense, as I was praying, I really got a sense that God was asking me to trust Him and to take steps, and that I might not see fully how the story was going to play out. And obviously, if any of us watch our stories, if we could see our stories play out, I think we would all just sit real still and not go anywhere because of all the things that happen in our stories. But I felt like God was just saying, just take another step, trust me. And then we're going to take another step and just trust me. And through our early days of adoption, I used to say it was almost like we walked up to a Walmart and those electronic doors would just fly open as soon as you stand on that, mat. Yeah. That's how visible God was making the path for us towards adoption when we first adopted Shohana. It was just so obvious that God was just saying, take another step. And, we would step, and then just this amazing, part of the story would happen. And it was no doubt that God was moving us, toward that. At the same time, in my mind, I'm going, I don't want to be like, I want to be able to give my heart fully to a child. And I am afraid that I won't love a child that I adopt like a child that I give birth to. And I just kept trusting God. I thought, if God's asking me to trust Him with the story of adoption, then I'm going to trust Him with my parenting as well. And I'm going to trust that love's going to be there and that it's going to show up at the right time. But I was very fearful of that, very fearful.
Did God come through?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think Emily and Steven obviously we were all together. We were all together in China when the elevator doors opened and this little bundle, came. They were carrying Shoei down the hallway, and I was about 10 minutes before Shoei was placed in my arms. I got Caleb and Will Franklin and Emily together and put them on the bed. I mean, I was in the hotel room and I just lined them all, but looked at them and I said, I do not know what's getting ready to happen in the next 24 hours of our life. And I said, just remember, Mom loves you. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I thought maybe I was going to run away. Just always remember our family's getting ready to change. I just want you to know I love you guys so much. And obviously when they placed Shoei in my arms, that thing that supernaturally happens, first and foremost, it was an encounter for myself, I finally got it through my thick head how God sees me in my own adoption story. They put Shoei in my arms, and she had a blanket that I had sent to her, but everything else was pretty ragtag and spoke loudly that she did not have a family. Wow. And there was nothing about her that she did or that she was that caused us all to immediately love her, but they handed her to us, and in that moment she became a Chapman, and everything that is ours became hers. And I've told a lot of people since that moment that I am a firm believer in life, of all life, and I think it's the greatest privilege when my first 3 children were born, that how we look at these little people and go, God's so magnificent in his story of creation. Like, how can we doubt a God when you see that 2 humans can make this little person, that comes from us, and how amazing that is. But I tell people all the time that I think it's more of a miracle and it's more of a God story when you can receive this child into your arms and they immediately become yours, because it mirrors the story of God's adoption of us. And so the supernatural thing that happened when Shoei came into our family is something that I needed for myself and for my own story of salvation, of redemption, of God sees me, as his, regardless of what I bring. And so, yes, to answer your question, it got taken care of in a nanosecond. It was all good in a magnificent way.
Well, that makes us all understand what has compelled you or brought you to create Show Hope, which is your nonprofit adoption organization, and you started that in 2003. You have helped provide homes through Adoption Aid grants for over 5,000 children from more than 50 countries. Is that something that, again, was God's work through Emily, or was that more of a family vision, or how did that come to be?
I'll tell my version real quickly.
So, this is basically God overfixed us.
This is how it happened as I observed. We came home with Shohana, and it was very quickly that we were approached by people who began to say, at the airport, having come home with Shoei, we had people saying to us, we would love to adopt someday. We're so excited for you guys. This stirs something deep in us, because we would love to adopt someday if we could just afford it. We just can't afford it right now, but hopefully someday we'll get to experience this. And having gone to China and begun this journey with this fear and trepidation that Mary Beth is talking about, and now coming home with her heart being just on fire to try to rescue as many of these children. We walked through Shoei's orphanage. We looked into the faces of so many of these little ones that seemed to all be looking up at, Mary Beth, especially saying, do you know where my family is? Can you go find them and tell them where I am? And she started multiplying that out in her mind. These are a few of the millions of children that are like this, waiting for their story to begin. And then we land on the other side of the big pond, in Nashville, Tennessee, and here families are saying, we would love to bring a child into our family. We just can't afford it right now. And so, my wife just immediately said, "Are you kidding me? That's all that's stopping you? Well, how much do you need? Here, let's write you a check, and literally on the spot started kind of saying, call me, let me get home, get unpacked, let me get settled, but let's talk. We got to do this. We got to help you do this." And that is it really how Show Hope, originally Shohana's Hope, because our daughter Shohana, her name is Shohana Hope, began there with just realizing there's a need and there's an opportunity here. And honestly, what I did is, I started looking for and asking around with our friends from adoption agencies in different places, where is the organization that gives help to families, financially helps families that want to adopt but just need some help to get that process completed. And there wasn't one, not one that we could find. So it was literally out of that we began helping one family, 10 families, a dream of helping 100 families through the adoption process with financial assistance. And And here we are talking, about approaching 6,000 grants now that we've been able to be a part of giving.
Yeah, but that's where it all started.
Parents, I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Steve and Mary Beth and Emily. We need to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Parents, we all hear about the trouble kids are getting into with digital devices and social media all the time. As a parent, what can you do to protect your kids? As a parent, it may not be possible to police all their activity, but it is possible and crucial to create intentional time for your family to connect without electronics. Introducing Off the Grid. Off the Grid is a family activity that makes it easy and fun for parents and kids to discuss their values and experiences with social media, online safety, and responsibility while learning about each other. To play, families simply silence their phones, put them in the box, take out the question cards, and go off the grid as you take turns asking each other questions. Off the Grid makes it easy to talk about boundaries and online safety, all while answering some fun questions that keep it just that, fun. Questions like, can you take too many selfies? Or, if you can invite a famous person to dinner, dead or alive, who would it be? What would you ask? And what would you serve them for dinner? Or, are there things you do on your phone that you hide from family members on purpose? Off the Grid makes it easy and fun to spend less time on screens and more time having conversations as a family. Go to offthegridbox.com and enter promo code MEG to receive a 20% discount through December 15th, 2017. There are a lot of people listening to the podcast who are thinking, boy, that sounds nice. I've thought about adoption, but I don't know. Maybe money is an issue. But when we think about adoption, we're adopting into the United States from different countries around the world. What are the major obstacles, aside from money, that many parents face in the adoption process? Is it our government? Is it other countries' governments? Because I know every country's different. Some will allow adoption, some won't. Have you been able to navigate? Obviously, you've been able to navigate those obstacles fairly well.
Certainly, there's many obstacles. Em, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think outside of finances and time, it's a big commitment in terms of paperwork and kind of getting ready for the process. Yes, certainly our government has regulations. Other countries working collaboratively with the Hague Convention, that adds kind of a level of protection, which is great. And much needed in the particularly the intercountry adoption process. But because of that, there's a lot of rules and regulations which are necessary but kind of add to the time. Mm-hmm. Mom, do you want to add?
Yeah, we Show Hope, founded in 2003. Our underlying hope is that we can also be an organization that is really known for best practices. Mm-hmm. And so adoption can be hard and difficult when you're looking outside of the United States. I mean, it's obviously difficult when you're looking at adopting domestically here in the United States. So we are real intentional with our families, and we try to help point them to countries who are operating within that Hague Convention. That just gives a level of protection, because there can just be some, adoptions that happen that aren't ethical. And so we really look for countries that are operating under the standards that the Hague set forth.
Can you tell us what some of those countries are?
Yeah, well, they fluctuate. Some become Hague accredited. I call it a spotlight. The spotlight kind of shines on some countries that go, okay, we're doing pretty good adoptions here, and then it kind of shifts around. But right now, one of the biggest countries that we do adoptions through is China. Obviously, our girls are from China, so that's a big one.
South Korea.
Obviously, the United States, we don't have to worry about the Hague because it's domestic. We, up until just a few months ago, that we allowed a lot of grants with families who were adopting from Ethiopia, but that is no longer possible, right, Em?
Right.
Oh, so you can no longer adopt from Ethiopia?
To the Hague. Well, the Civil Affairs Office in Ethiopia, they've kind of put a halt on exit letters for children from Ethiopia. or they've said that they will only issue exit letters that are no's. And so that kind of, more or less ends the process there, because they're not approving any children to leave the country right now.
Families they'll get in a process, and, again, we're not an adoption agency. We're only the facilitator of these adoption aid grants, but it's really heartbreaking because families will get in these situations where they're going down one direction, and then the country closes, and then they have to look elsewhere. India is beginning to open up, and they're Hague compliant, so we're starting to see families who are adopting from India. But it changes all the time, and we really try to point our families into agencies that are doing best practices and countries that are doing best practices, because we really believe that ethical all the way through is what needs to happen.
Haiti's Hague approved, Bulgaria. You can find information on the State Department's website. There's an Intercountry Adoption Bureau of Consular Affairs website that you can see all the different convention countries there.
I've seen a number of children in my medical practice who have come from different parts of the country, and it's always astounding to me how different the experiences are of the children who have come from different countries, how well they're taken care of or how poorly they're taken care of. Do you steer parents towards certain countries and away from other countries that might be Hague approved, or do you just sort of let the families and the adoption agencies handle that?
I will speak to this. So we come in, Show Hope comes in at a little further on in the process, and so in order to apply for financial assistance through Show Hope, you are already working with an agency and home study ready, and so we are really relying on the agencies in terms of sort of vetting families and informing families on certain countries or what kind of their experiences are with their processes in those countries. We certainly have our own experiences and opinions around where we've seen stories we've seen of children coming home from certain countries. But I think the most important thing for us at Show Hope, that we are trying to speak with grace and gentleness into the adoption advocacy world, is that we understand through child psychology and brain development that every child that comes home through adoption, whether that's home from the hospital with their family that is adopting them, or whether that's after months or years in institutional care, that every adoption does begin with the trauma of being separated from birth father and birth mother, and so we have to counter our way of journeying with these children in their stories and in life differently than our children maybe that are brought to us biologically. And so I think it's important for us at Show Hope to recognize that regardless of country, all these children come to us with their unique needs that demand our awareness of and our response to in a way that might be different than we're used to. So that, I think, is the more important thing than what country necessarily is providing best for their children.
Yeah. Would you say that the majority, or how the adoption places are split and divided? Do you help with mostly U.S. adoptions, mostly adoptions from China, or is there a pretty equal split of all different countries?
Currently, right now, in terms of our financial assistance, the grants that we're giving at Show Hope, our majority, about 40% of our applicants are adopting from China, and all those adoptions are children with medical needs or special needs, because that's the adoptions that China are currently doing intercountry. And then behind China is the United States. So domestic adoptions is about another 25% of our adoption aid applicants. And then the other 30 or so percent, 30 to 40% is a variety of countries.
If I could just interject something, I don't know if this is your experience, but when you say children are adopted from China with special needs or medical conditions, my experience has been that many of these are very small to American standards. They're very small medical issues, that many of them can be corrected. So I just want to communicate to our audience that if you are considering adoption and you're thinking about a child with special needs or medical issues, many times these are issues that in the United States we would consider really pretty small. So I wouldn't let that stop you if you're thinking of, adopting. That's my personal experience. It could be very different from other people's, but I'm just such a child advocate and want to see so many more children adopted, because I think it opens up a whole new world, not just for them, but for the families that they are adopted into. Emily, you have 3 lovely girls of your own, and I know you're a very busy young mother. Would you see adoption as something you would want to do down the road, or are you too busy helping other people adopt?
Oh, that's a great question.
Or you don't even want to think about what to do right now?
I'll wait till my children are 11 and see what happens. I feel like I have it coming to me, and Grandma and Grandpa are planting seeds already. Currently, right now, I feel my schedule and my life feels very full. I'm privileged to be able to be alongside other families in the adoption process through my role at Show Hope, which I don't think I would be able to be serving in that capacity if God entrusted more children to me right now. So I see my involvement currently as my role at Show Hope, but my husband and I have also learned to never say never. And so we're open to the idea, but not currently pursuing it.
And, that kind of was an unfair thing. I think God has a great sense of humor. That's all.
He does.
and yes, and I do too.
And God's going to do what God's going to do whenever God wants to do it. So we'll just see how this all plays out.
When you get to your parents' age and my age, you realize, we have no control over everything. We've just lived with this idea that we were making choices and had control, but God's totally in control. And He does have a great sense of humor. One of the greatest joys is watching your kids parent and having them start to see you with a whole new light, which is really fun. So we're going to close here and over the next few minutes, and I really want to encourage any of our listeners who are out there who even thought for a few moments about adoption. My hope is that they will feel more encouraged about adoption. And I would love to hear, Mary Beth, you and Steven talk about overall, can you imagine what your life would have been like if you hadn't started a second round of children or adopted, more children into your family? From a dad's standpoint, I know, Steven, your experience as a dad is very different from Mary Beth's, because I assume she was a little more hands-on with all the kids because you were traveling. But as a father, how has adoption changed you? And what would you say to men out there whose wives are thinking, well, I think I'd like to adopt, but I really don't know? What would you like to say to those men?
Mary Beth and I have often said this, and people have heard me say it. It's hard to imagine. Sometimes we kind of shudder to think what we could have missed and would have missed had we stayed, in our safe, predictable plan that we had for our life, while our life has been anything but predictable on so many levels. We had our ideas and our plans, and I love how Scripture says it. We make our plans, but God directs our steps. And I've been again talking and thinking so much about how God has directed our steps in ways that we never would have imagined. And for me as a dad, on so many levels, getting to watch what God did in my wife's heart, watching her go from this place of how can I do this, a lot of fear and questions and concern, through adoption. And she tells it much better than I can, but God just opened her heart to so much of a deeper understanding of grace and her own adoption. And so getting to observe that, getting to watch that in her life, getting to watch how it transformed the lives of my sons to become big brothers of these 3 little girls and their stories and where they came from, and to see the men that my sons have become, and even now the dad that one is and one's getting ready to become any day now, any hour now maybe.
Yeah, I keep watching my phone. We're waiting for somebody to go in labor. Because we've got a grandbaby
coming, Will Franklin, any hour in the next 4 or 5 days. But, watching these guys, watching how it transformed them. Of course, watching Emily, watching it transform her life to see this prayer that she'd prayed, in this miracle that she'd prayed and hoped for unfold, and then how it would direct her path, and how God would use that, to even deepen her heart with a passion for children, in crisis, and to care for them, and now to do such great, brilliant work that she's doing, and then of course, to get to be dad of Shoei and Stevie Joy and Maria, and those that know our story and know that Maria went to be with Jesus 9 years ago, and we've walked through the darkest, most unimaginable journey as parents and as a family, and while we would do everything and anything we could to change that and undo that, we say that even with the heartache and the pain, only because we believe the story's not over yet, and we believe with all our hearts that a day is coming when the tears are going to be wiped all from our eyes, that even with the heartache, we would not want to miss the joy, the experience, the deepening of just our experience of, when Jesus said, "I've come to give you life to the fullest." I really believe for us, it's full of joy. It's even opening yourself to even greater heartache, because you're going to experience all the extremes, I believe, of life to the fullest. But to get to experience and see that God is inviting us into this deeper experience of who He is, and watching Him show up in ways that, it's crazy. It's to see the ways that God has revealed Himself in our lives and our journey. So much of that has come through our experience of adoption. So many ways that God has shown Himself to be so much more creative than we imagine, so much more winsome. Just the things the stories, and you go, okay, there's no way that, that's not coincidence. And we hear that from families, all the time, that say, once we started this journey, we watch God just show up in ways that we would have never, ever experienced otherwise. So anyway, that's a little bit I could go on and
beautiful.
on. So
that's beautiful. Thank you. Mary Beth, what would you want to say to women out there, young mothers, older mothers? There's certainly parents in their 40s and 50s considering adoption. What would you want to say to those mothers? Or maybe even the mothers who have already adopted, who are sort of new at this whole process?
I used to, back when we were considering adoption, I felt like I got to a place where I was thinking, okay, old mom or no mom? Okay, I think I can be an old mom. So, old mom or no mom? Well, okay, Shoei needs a mom, so older as is, But look, I've lived this now our Shoei is 18 years old. She's a senior in high school, and we're looking at colleges, and she's trying to figure out what her next steps are. And I look at my husband and our other children, and I go, we did this. Like, we raised her. Like, it was a blink of an eye, and they handed her to us as entrusted us with her as her family. And now she's getting ready to jump out of the nest and fly. And I'm going, I hope she flies. No, I know. She'll fly. But I think there's probably some people listening to this podcast that are also in probably more difficult places. Adoption is hard. Adoption is the greatest blessing that's ever come our way, and it's also been, like Steven said, the extremes are incredible that you experience. And I would say to just trust God with the complete story, because He really is revealing Himself to you. And it's why at Show Hope we even offer these pre and post adoption services for families who are walking through a more difficult time with their adoption. Maybe they aren't feeling the things they thought they were going to feel. Maybe the children are, they didn't understand this whole attachment, some of the attachment trauma that can come with being separated, but there's hope, and there's help, and there's really strong ways in which we can help some of these families. So whatever the journey is, whether it's going completely great and everything's good, or whether people are out there struggling. I think if we as believers believe that God's invited us into this journey, into the story, if you know that you're supposed to be a part of this thing called adoption, then God's going to give you what you need to continue to walk, every day, that journey. And that's what I have to remember. We've had some bumps along the way, but God has shown up in every way possible.
Emily?
Wow. What would I say?
Well, speaking, if you could, to just back up and speak as a sibling. Now, I am assuming that most parents don't have an 11-year-old at home who's begging their parents to adopt children, because I think that might be unique to the Chapman family. I could be wrong, but might be.
It might be.
I've met a couple other 11-year-olds, not many, but and I get the death stares from their parents behind them, going, "Don't you even encourage her?" I'm like, "Sorry, you shouldn't have brought her here to talk to me." No, just kidding.
Yeah, but what would you want to say to parents who have their own children who are considering adoption but are concerned about the impact on their biologic children?
Well, I would just so encourage, clearly it's got to be something that that God is moving your family toward, because as Mom alluded to, there can be hard in the journey. For me, it was something that I was very passionate about, and so it was easy to get on board with. I said earlier, I consider adoption one of the greatest blessings in my life. It's given me and my brothers a more robust understanding of what it means to be family. We've had to have conversations around the dinner table that without being a family that has children that came home through adoption, without being an interracial family, we wouldn't have had these conversations. We wouldn't have been afforded the opportunity to have these conversations. And now with my sisters becoming adults and growing up, they are participating in some really, really eye-opening conversations that perspectives I would not have been afforded. And so it's amazing to be a part of the journey. I think I still very much so see my involvement with my sisters as part of my adoption story, and a commitment from me to care well for them means continuing to be invested in their lives and showing up when they cheerlead and showing up when they have competitions, and trying to just continue to be that sibling. And so for me, to parents, the impact, it's beyond what you can imagine. It's the extremes that Mom and Dad talk to. It's the hardest of hard, but those hard times forge you into a stronger family than you were before.
And the best times outweigh the painful times. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I always sum up when people are asking me about that. I just say I could have missed it. And to know that even with some of the difficulties, I could have missed it. I could have missed the opportunity to spend the last 18 years watching this little human called Joey, grow into all that God wants her to be and do and experience. And same with Stevie Joy. And quite frankly, the 5 years that we had Maria, I got to be her mom, and I got to hear her ask Jesus to come live in her heart. And I hold on to that every day, because there's a day coming that, my future is far greater with Maria than the time that is behind us.
And we know it's a blink. It just feels mighty long, doesn't it?
Well, I would say, too, that just as they're talking, and this is the hope that we have. It has to be the hope that drives us and motivates us in the work we do is show hope, because we often, if we start looking at the need and start looking at, we celebrate 6,000, grants that we've helped families, or, these hundreds of children that we get to help through the work that we do in China. And then you look at you pull the scope out just a little bit and you go, that's a tiny drop in the bucket, or you look at, the hard that we know families are enduring, and there's, and knowing that even with all the greatest help, that that there's still going to be hard in some of these stories. There's still hard and pain that we're going to limp through our journey, of our life towards heaven with this heartache and this heaviness that, that we will carry with us in our loss of Maria and all that brings with it. And it all, for me, again, my remembering theme comes down to not only remembering our story and how God did all these amazing things to bring about the work of Show Hope and what we get to be a part of, but it's remembering forward into the future and believing that every one of these lives and these children, that are adopted, if it's hard, if it's incredibly difficult, the challenges, the joys, all of that, it is all just the beginning of the story that God's telling and God's writing. That's eternal. And to think that, by these little ones that we brought into our family and our home, for all of eternity, the impact in their lives, the fact that we will get to see this story continue to unfold all the way into eternity, to know that because our families have been woven together, and I don't know, obviously none of us know how exactly that's going to work itself out in heaven. I just know it's going to be perfectly right, and we're going to realize that what God invited us into now as adoptive parents or those who come alongside families that have adopted, all of that is for eternity. It's not even just for this life, for the hard, for the good, for all of that. That ultimately, this is these are eternally significant steps that we're taking, and God's doing something that the story is going to keep unfolding for ever and ever and ever.
Amen. I tell you, God's plan is always so much bigger than ours is, and we see just this tiny little slice, and yet He's got this, as you said, this massive picture of us interwoven with our children for so much more time and more blessing and more joy. Steven Curtis, Mary Beth Chapman, Emily Richards, this has been so delightful. Please tell our audience how they can connect with Show Hope, or if they're interested in adopting or they need support for the adoption process, or they just want to support you and your work at Show Hope. How can people get involved with the work that you're doing?
All of that can be found at www.showhope.org. It's a pretty amazing little website, so it's pretty easy to navigate around, and you can find everything there that tells you about if you're an adoptive family that want to apply for a grant, that information's there. How to donate, that information's there. Our work in China, our work in the pre and post adoption services. We have a student initiative if you're a student and want to get involved. If you want to take a trip with us, all of that's on the website.
I can't tell you how grateful I am of your time. You've been very gracious, very generous with your time. Thank you so much. God bless you in your work, and anything we can do to help get the word out about Show Hope or help in any way. Like I said, we too have a global audience. I'd love to help in any way that I can. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
God bless.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I want to thank my very special guests, Steven Curtis and Mary Beth Chapman and Emily Richards. What an absolute joy and honor to have them join me right here on Parenting Great Kids. Friends, whether you're considering adoption, know someone who is, or interested in becoming involved in adoption care, you can learn more about the Show Hope organization at showhope.org. What a wonderful time this has been. And wherever you are in your family's journey, I hope you're encouraged and inspired by what you've heard today. So until next time, parents, remember, great kids are raised, not born.
Hey, this is Bobby, producer of Meg Meeker's Parenting Great Kids podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening to episode 41, The Hope of Adoption. And thanks to you, Dr. Meg's Parenting Revolution has grown to over 1 million downloads. You can like Dr. Meeker on Facebook and follow her on Twitter and Instagram at MegMeekerMD. Just as a reminder, go to MegMeekerMD.com and sign up for her newsletter for giveaway opportunities and updates. And don't forget to share the podcast, write us a review, and click subscribe so you won't miss an episode.